Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to today's CA Service Management Community Webcast. Today we have Dale Clark and Rich Graves presenting on an AI-based virtual agent for CA Service Management. Just a couple notes before we start. This is a session that we had last week that we ran into audio difficulties. And to make sure that if we run into that again, we have an option to continue, I'm going to put information in the chat window for folks that if for some reason our audio gets disconnected, we have another session that's PC audio only that we can go to and continue. Hopefully that's information you'll never need, but just in case, you'll know why it's there. Also, we'll be taking questions at the end of the session. You can put your question in at any time into the Q&A tab. We are using just the Q&A, not the chat. So please use the Q&A and be sure you ask your question of everyone so we're sure to see it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dale for further introduction and to start the session.
Thanks, Chris. We've got a ton of information to provide for you this morning, and we've done some of this in last week's webcast, so if some of this sounds a little bit repetitious at the beginning, please bear with us, and we'll get to the new content here quite shortly. But let's get right to it. Now, since information technology was first widely introduced some 40 years ago, there's been a dramatic growth in the number of things that need to be supported. As we added new capabilities to make businesses more capable, that growth rate has been consistently accelerating. And when technology became the driving force in our consumer lives, the lines between our business lives and consumer lives really have blurred and changed the very nature about how we provide service to our customers, constituents, and peers. Now, the competition for consumer hearts and minds in an interconnected world has placed a newfound emphasis on rapid and effective interactions. And this has shaped people's expectations about what's an acceptable pace of delivery in their business activities as well as in their consumer lives. IT organizations have really worked to try to keep pace, first through support desks and call centers providing phone support. But from the beginning, providing conversations via the phone had some scale issues. The growing volume of requests and issues required a rather large body of support experts. And because technical experts tended to use their own lingo that frequently didn't translate to an acceptable experience for the person who was trying to get help. Then as email and web access became more widely used, IT teams created systems that could be used to assist people in accessing support in a more self-service model so that they could augment that telephone support mechanism. People looking for help could then send in their requests via email or go to a website and fill in a form to select items, possibly even from a catalog. Now, these approaches provided some value, but they all have their own limitations. If we really look at things honestly, self-service approaches were never really expected to provide a higher degree of customer satisfaction than telephone support. They were a response to the reality that it's just not practical to provide that knowledgeable support person who can have a productive conversation about every issue and request. Instead, self-service was hoped to reduce the cost of support by improving your overall service efficiency and possibly deflecting some of those requests from the support team. Now, out of those, email is perhaps the worst, but probably most widely used self-service approach. The person needing support is unlikely to have an understanding of what details he should be including, and he's going to spend much more time composing that email than they would if they had simply invested in a simple phone conversation. Now, web forms are somewhat better because they can be set up so that they help guide the person needing support to provide better classification details. Unfortunately, this approach tends to also leverage that terminology that's used within IT teams to describe the kind of services from their perspective. And this leaves the person using the form to tend to guess at which term best fits their situation. Now, service catalogs are better still. And in addition to hopefully guiding the user to the right catalog item, the user might actually also discover other services that they're interested in along the way. And the level of detail that you can gather utilizing a service catalog is really only limited by the time that you want to spend setting it up. Now, both forms and catalogs are still highly susceptible to being more aligned to the IT organization's perceptions about the services and the language that they use to describe them than the perspective that would be helpful to a user of those systems. And they both require that the user knows how to get to the right place when they need help. So do these mechanisms really help with the service efficiency of your operation? Generally, not quite as much as you might hope. As you might expect, all email-based requests are going to require some direct interaction from an analyst. And the vast majority of them are going to require some back and forth interactions with the user, either via email or quite frequently by phone. And then a significant number of those items are going to end up getting reassigned or escalated due to a need for reclassifying after the initial analyst review. So emails still have major difficulties. The vast majority of form-based items, utilizing a web portal, they don't really get you to that zero-touch goal, where you're only going to see a small percentage that come through that actually achieve that intended goal for zero touch. And then the level of necessary analyst follow-up for most catalog items is still much higher than you would anticipate. So all these mechanisms tend to miss the mark on a couple of specific points. They don't provide assistance in the conversational manner that people looking for help would prefer, and they also require folks to leave the communication channels where they spend most of their time. So at the risk of sounding a little bit like a columnist for an advice for the Love Learn series, I'd like to take a quick look at what folks really want from their support team. From a support seeker perspective, it's all about me. After all, support's there to help me be productive and do my job as well as possible, right? So my satisfaction with a support interaction hinges on a couple of items. I want 7 by 24 by 365 availability. I want the support team to be available whenever I happen to be doing something work-related. I want them to be available in my channel of communication. I don't want to have to go out searching for how to connect with them. I want them to know who I am, what I do, and what tools and resources I typically use. And they should speak my language. So, they really need to eliminate the jargon and terminology that only an IT person would understand. And I want to interact with the right person first. I don't want to get routed through half a dozen folks that are just gathering one little tidbit of information so that they can pass me along to somebody who might possibly be able to solve my problem. I want that right expert to be the person that I interact with first and foremost. And I want to get my request fulfilled now. My schedule doesn't really have the flexibility to accommodate a bunch of back and forth interactions. Now, I've spoken to a lot of service management people through my career. I've been involved with this for many years. And in my own research, I found that the single top reason that people will avoid interacting with a support team is because they feel that if they start an interaction with the support team, it's going to result in a draw on their schedule that they don't have control over, and they're just not willing to do that. So that leaves the IT operations team with really a dizzying array of challenges they've got to overcome. You've got a constantly growing set of tools, technologies, and apps you've got to support. You've got customers and constituents who are leveraging new communication channels on almost a daily basis. And yeah, can you also deliver that stellar support in a manner that's going to fit everyone's preferred interaction style? The answer is, yeah, it's a challenge. So how does an IT organization provide that kind of support that not only helps drive support efficiency, but does so in a manner that aligns with helping to improve their overall customer and user satisfaction? Now, the answer for something like that is going to lie in applying recent advances that we've seen in natural language processing, artificial intelligence, and then placing that into a focused effort on building a more intelligent support experience. Now, hi, I'm Dale Clark, and I've had the good fortune to be involved with and develop software for the service management industry since 1991. And although I've led product teams for a number of vendors, this webcast is specifically intended for organizations that are using CA Technologies' IT service management offerings. So the experiences that I gathered during my 13 years as the product line manager for CA's ITSM offerings is probably going to be helpful as we discuss some new challenges that are available to you. Now, if I go back even a bit further, ever since I started working back on the Heat product in 1991, I've been intrigued by the potential for improving an organization's ability to keep their employees productive through improved tools and processes. Now, I had a background in AI when I first started into this, so I was rather disappointed to find that the state of the art back then for AI was both woefully inadequate and impractically expensive for use regarding most support scenarios. So through the years, we really had to make do with the technology that was at hand, and we ended up creating systems that could make use of things like knowledge articles to provide mechanisms to simplify the process of raising issues and requests. Then during my time at CA Technologies, we really helped to expand that support domain so that we could enable a number of self-service capabilities. But they still had the inherent challenges that I had mentioned earlier about service catalogs and self-service portals. At that point, artificial intelligence was still relegated to very specific use cases and was really more of a parlor trick than a viable mechanism for broad use within a support context. So when the folks at Serviceaide contacted me a few months ago with a request to help them deliver a practical AI-driven solution focused entirely on the IT service management arena, you can imagine they got my full attention. Now, as an added bonus, I got to work with a number of really great service management professionals, several of which are pretty well known by the CA service management community. Rich Graves, who filled many key roles within CA Technologies, is now leading the product management team for Serviceaide, and he's joined me to provide a little bit of detail about Serviceaide and the Luma virtual support agent that they've developed and made available for Service Desk Manager customers. So, Rich, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Dale. I appreciate the warm introduction, and it's fun to see so many familiar names on the attendee list from my time with CA and CA Service Desk Manager or CA Service Management. So just a brief introduction. So I do run the product management team at Serviceaide. If you're not familiar with Serviceaide, I'll go into it just a little bit. But essentially, we were formed by the acquisition of some technology from CA several years ago. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but I have been in the service management industry longer than I'd like to admit, but it's been a good time, and I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all today about about Luma and about some of the key features of AI for service management and for CA service management. So jumping right into it, over the next couple slides, I'll talk about a little bit about the company, the vision, but really focus on why we built Luma for CA Service Desk Manager and the value that it brings you as a customer of CA Service Desk Manager, CA Service Management. So just about Serviceaide real quick. So we're completely focused on service management. We're a small company focused on service management. We are private, venture capital backed. And we were formed by the acquisition of assets from CA, so the CA Cloud Service Management product, which it was known by at CA, as well as some assets from a company called WG Sigma Systems. WG Sigma Systems focused on big data and machine learning technology for different industry verticals. And our founders came from, companies like Amdocs, and really saw an opportunity where on the customer service and the call center world, AI was used widely. I mean, if you think about, our CTO worked on a project at DirecTV. If you imagine DirecTV, if they can use AI to, automate the thousands and thousands of customer service requests they get every single day and have tens of thousands of agents, you can imagine that's a massive improvement to the bottom line. So there was just a bigger need to drive down costs at that level, so that's why AI started there. And now the opportunity they saw was saying, well, wow, why aren't we using AI in service management? So that's why the company was formed. We're headquartered in San Jose, California, and have offices around the globe. But I'll talk about now shifting over to Luma. So Luma is the name for our AI-based virtual agent. So if you're not familiar with the term virtual agent, I think the term that's often thrown around is a chatbot. So we're a lot more than a chatbot, and that's why we use the term virtual agent. But a chatbot is essentially, a way to interact with a user, that is a machine interacting with the user rather than a person. And Luma uses two pieces of key technology to do this interaction. First, natural language processing. So that means that Luma can understand phrases, sentences, context from a user. So when the user says, I need a password reset, we can trigger what's called a generic password reset skill. If they say, I need a password reset for Salesforce, we know that's different, and we know how to interact, and maybe there's a specific password reset for Salesforce, or maybe we just fill the value of the password reset of that generic skill, fill the attribute there, and pass it along when we're creating the ticket or automating the request. And then machine learning. Machine learning is used as a component of AI, is used to improve the understanding of the engine, to improve Luma's understanding over time. So the more questions, the more things the user asks, the more ways that user asks for a password reset or a network printer issue, the better Luma understands them in learning over time. Luma does connect to multiple IT service management solutions. We integrated with our own service management solution first, and then immediately built an integration with CA's service management solution. And the reason for that is we have a great relationship with CA. We have a lot of former CA employees at Serviceaide, and we just really see the opportunity to work closely with CA to deliver value to a large customer base that is CA service management. Last and probably one of the most important points of Luma is just what Dale was talking about, making it easier for users to get support. And this is where we didn't want to design another app that you have to put on your phone. We wanted to leverage existing messaging channels. So if your organization uses Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business or Slack or Google Hangouts or Facebook Messenger and on, you could basically are just creating a contact in your directory of users and just saying this is the support contact, or you can name it Acme Corp support bot or Acme Corp support agent. And users reach out through chat, probably a tool they use all day, every day during their workday to reach out to support. So I'll move on and now talk about really the key values of Luma. So we really tried to focus the solution on delivering service efficiency. And I'll break down service efficiency into 5 key areas, both on the end user side and on the support team side. So I'll go through each one of these, and there'll be a little video of a chat session playing on the right-hand side, so you get a sense of what I'm talking about or what this really looks like if you were to implement it in your organization. And the demos are built in Facebook Messenger just because it's an easy platform to get up and running on. But you can imagine the same look and feel for Microsoft Teams or Slack or Google Hangouts. So we'll move on to the first two areas. So there's two key things, and they're very closely related. The first is what we call intelligently guided ticket submissions. So this is really making the ticket creation process much, much easier for the end user. So if you imagine today, and Dale mentioned about email, email is so widely used because it's so easy to use. But I hear all the time from organizations that they get an email that says, you know, my laptop is broken. Well, what in the world does that mean? Does that mean it doesn't boot up? Does that mean the battery is dead? Does that mean the monitor is cracked? Does that mean it won't connect to the network? Is the hard drive blank? I mean, there's a million solutions, and what that immediately creates is back and forth with the user. So really, the ease of creating the ticket from the end user's perspective is great, but you've immediately just added tons of hours to the process because now you're playing phone tag with the user to try to understand what do they really mean by that. So you're either going back and forth on email, going back and forth on the phone. And what we wanted to create with Luma is through this conversational interface, an easy way to guide the user through the process of inputting a ticket. And this is very similar in a sense to a catalog or a form, but the big difference is we can prompt the user with responses. As you saw in this video, they can click, you know, responses, quick replies is what they're called. And we also understand synonyms, and that's a huge difference. If they say, you know, I have an Office 365 issue, or they have an Office issue, or they have a Microsoft Office issue, you know, there's lots of different ways they can ask for that, and we can understand those synonyms. And that just makes it easier for the user rather than, you know, they probably don't know how to find something in their catalog. Actually, just yesterday I was on the phone with a customer who said, we asked them how many things are in their catalog today. And they said, well, they started with a small amount because they wanted to keep it simple, but then they realized no one knew where to find stuff. So they created a bigger catalog. Well, and that actually made the problem worse. So that's why they wanted to go with a conversational interface to make it easier for people to find things. The second component of this is what we call complete and actionable tickets. So jump back a second, Dale, sorry. So complete and actionable tickets, so we went through that triage process with the user. We guided them through the creation of the ticket. Well, the real value of that is you now have quality information in the system that a technician can actually take action on. So when we say an actionable ticket, when that level 1 person picks up the ticket, they say, I know what to do. I can immediately start focusing on troubleshooting and resolving rather than, you know, basic triage and calling the person back and playing that phone tag. Okay, so moving on to the next point, so point number 3 here is increased zero-touch resolutions. So what this really means is automation. And Dale had mentioned a term that I love, the idea of shifting work left or shift left. Meaning, you know, you have these really expensive level 1 resources, and we're not suggesting that you get rid of people. We're suggesting that you use those people that are expensive resources to do things that are really important and not deal with password resets and boring, manual tasks. It really is saying, let's leverage your resources for what they're good at, and those are much tougher, human brain thinking type of operations. So at the point of entry from an end user, why not automate the conversation, automate the request there? So if they come in asking about a password reset, which is what this video showed, let's resolve the password reset and not have any person involved in the process. And we can really do that. This is real self-service and not just a catalog of opening up an issue. So a password reset is a simple example, but we have an automation engine under the covers that connects it to Active Directory and VMware, AWS and Salesforce and Workday and lots of other solutions. So if someone comes in and says, I need to change my Salesforce permissions, assuming that's something you allow to be done, we can completely automate that. We can connect to Salesforce, we can change their permissions, we can notify them and say it's done in a matter of seconds versus creating a ticket and waiting for the process to complete. Okay, so I hope that zero touch makes sense because it's really about automation and simplifying things there directly from a conversation. So moving on to the next point, point 4, is automated follow-up and ticket closures. And this is probably my favorite value point because this came directly from a lot of our research. We worked with one organization who told us that 30% of their level 1 agent time was spent on following up just on resolved tickets. So 30%. And they were a high-touch, high customer service-driven organization. So when a ticket moved to a resolved state, they would first try to reach out to them on chat. If they weren't available, they would call them on the phone. If they weren't available, they'd send them an email. So that's 3 touch points, and they have to do that again every 24 hours over a 72-hour period before they can automatically close the ticket. So that's high touch, and they wanted to be, have a good relationship with their customers. But they asked, well, can we automate this completely? Can we have Luma follow up on chat with the user and say, hey, is your ticket resolved? Yes or no? And then based on that response, take action. If they say, yes, it is resolved, let's close the ticket. Thank you, customer. Even survey them, do some nice things there. If it's not resolved, well, let's reopen it and get someone working on it immediately. And that's, again, over chat. It's not just sending an email where someone's directing it to a folder they're never going to read. It's a chat going to them and reaching out to them over a periodic time. We could reach out every 24 hours, every 6 hours. We can do this on approvals based on different states of the ticket. So if it's a customer pending issue, you could follow up. So this is really, I try to visualize it of saying, here's a stack of work, a bunch of paperwork that's boring to do, and hand it over to Luma. Say, hey, virtual agent, you take all this stuff off my plate. I'll work on resolving people's issues. So that's an important note, and I think would add just tremendous value to an organization. And moving on to the last point here is really an interesting one that we started to realize is if you're using a catalog today, and there's lots of good reasons to use a catalog, but you're probably not, you don't have a good sense of what your customers really need from a support perspective. And this is where a virtual agent, a conversational interface, gives you insight into what your people, your employees really need. Because they're going to come in and they're going to ask questions that you don't have answers for today. So, maybe someone comes in and says, what's the company vacation schedule? Well, that's not an IT skill or catalog item that you're going to have. But if people are asking for that, maybe you need to direct them to the right place. Maybe you need to have a simple FAQ response. Maybe if they're asking other things related to facilities, well, why not create a ticket from this facility system? So I'm giving examples of HR and facilities which aren't traditionally in this sort of virtual agent, but it gives you a chance to look at unmet needs. What are people asking for? What is not hitting what we call a skill or a conversation? And then how are they asking for things? This is really important because you have a full log of every conversation, every question that a user asked. And if the user asked a question that was not resolved or did not hit any conversation in the interface, you have a log of that, and you can go say, oh, we really should create a skill for that. Or, you know what, when they asked for this, they asked for, I don't know, an Office 365, distribution group or something. They asked for it in a totally different way than we anticipated. So let's train the machine and improve our machine learning so that we can hit that and have a better experience for the customer next time they ask. Okay, and that was the video playing there was our actual interface for managing the conversation, so you could get a sense of that. We can go ahead, Dale, I'm sorry. So now talking about the ticketing process, because when we designed Luma, we really looked at the ticketing process. This is sort of the before state of where can we automate, where can we take steps out of this process, completely automate and eliminate those steps. So this is where Luma comes in, and then we feel like with the improvements to follow-up, the improvements on triage and correct assignment, that we can save about 30% of ticketing time for tickets that start in the Luma process, the Luma interface. So it's really taking a lot of different steps out of the process and handing them over to Luma and automating that. So there's a real impact to cost because now your team can hopefully scale and handle more, improvement on the customer service side and customer satisfaction side, as well as mean time to resolution is going to come down because you're taking steps out of the process. Okay. So everything I've talked about so far has been focused on really the end user. And while the end user is the primary target for Luma, there's a lot more. We come out of the box with what we call 100 or what we call skills, and 170 plus of them. And these are skills that relate to common support requests. So we created a ton of these to just make the start process much easier for customers, so they come in and say, oh, well, there's already a report a Salesforce account issue ticket. So let's use that and we'll tweak it based on our processes. So there's already I'm just picking ones out of here, report an issue with VPN. So we'll use that skill and then we'll tweak it again for our process. So we tried to make that very easy. That there are 170 different skills out of the box you can use, and we're certainly adding more each release. So next, talking about what you can do with Luma. This is the next 3 slides talk through examples of what can be done with Luma. The first is related to the end user, and it's all about making that experience for them with the support team much, much easier. And these are the videos are very similar to the screenshots that I'm showing here. But an end user can come in and say, hey, I need to modify my Salesforce permissions. I can't connect to a network printer. I need to reset my AD password, create a WebEx account. All of these can be done through Luma, and some of these are out-of-the-box skills and some that you could easily create. The last point on this slide is probably the most important, because we're very aware that sometimes you can get into sort of a weird loop talking to a chatbot or a virtual agent, or the virtual agent's not helpful or just doesn't know the answer to your question. So we always wanted to have a simple way to get to a person. So at any point in time during a conversation with Luma, you can say transfer to agent, and you're going to be put into a queue where you can talk to an actual technician through a chat interface and work through the question or challenge that you're having. And what's also important is the technician, when they pick up your request for the chat, the actual person that's taking your chat request, they're going to see a full history of that end user's interaction with Luma. So that technician picks it up, sees the full chat conversation. They say, oh, you know what? I see that Dale was having trouble with a network printer. So immediately that technician is smarter, and they certainly look smarter to the end user. And they say, hey, Dale, I see you're having a problem with a network printer, that you're in the Seattle office. I can help you with that right away. So that's really, really important, and something that we wanted to make sure that we're very careful, because this type of change can have a lot of impact, and you still want to keep the people close to the process and have support be able to engage when people can't get what they need from a machine. So the next group of users is the analysts, and that's a big difference between us and, you could go search on the web and find probably 500 different chatbots that will happily build a custom solution or put a sales FAQ on your website, on your company external website, to be able to, answer typical FAQs. We came at this, and again, the reason why we use the term virtual agent is that we're focused on service management and the users of service management, and that's not just end users. So we have a huge number of skills for agents or analysts. So there's level 1 or level 2 technicians can, reassign a ticket, view recent changes in the organization, take ownership of a ticket, add a work log or a comment to a ticket. And they can trigger automation like, okay, restart an Apache server, and go through the prompts of the data to restart that Apache server. So there's a lot of things you can do that are specific to an analyst or an agent that, of course, a customer is not going to see and end user is not going to see. But that can make their lives easier, because many of these things, putting in a command is much, much faster than going into the interface, finding the ticket, clicking the assignment tab, and selecting the right user to assign ownership of this ticket. And additionally, because all these chat platforms have a mobile app, so if you're using, say, Microsoft Teams, you can use voice in those apps to say, I can, click the microphone button on my iPhone and say, reassign ticket 123 to Dale Clark, and it will just do it for me. And the last group of users is really managers. And managers are a very different group of users, and we interviewed several managers and really asked questions about, what do you do first thing when you wake up in the morning? What do you do when you're commuting to work? What do you worry about? What are the things that you call a team member or the person on the previous shift and say, hey, what's going on? And then we also asked managers, what do they do when they're in a meeting with their executive team? What information do they need to have access to? And we built a set of skills specific for managers for viewing the backlog report. So when they're brushing their teeth in the morning and they want to understand what's going on with the backlog, or what's going on with unassigned tickets, or tickets that haven't been touched by a team member in a certain number of days, or maybe there's a ticket, an organization or a department or a customer that's, you know, a hot site, and they want to just see what's going on with tickets specific to that organization. Those are all skills that are designed specifically for managers. And a lot of these skills we've talked about the idea of looking smart in a meeting. So if I'm the support manager and I'm sitting in a meeting with my management team and they're saying, oh, what's going on with the backlog, or what's the trend, or how many tickets are currently, you know, about to break their SLA, I can do those things through a conversation on my laptop, on my, you know, phone, and get those answers quickly. And of course, when it's on your phone, you can, you know, take the image of the backlog report that's in the right-hand side there, and you can text it to someone. You can save it to your phone. You can pass the phone around the meeting, and certainly look smart to the rest of the team there. Okay, so before I transition back to Dale, there's one more thing I want to cover. So all this is driven by what we call Skills Builder. So Skills Builder is a form-based approach to building essentially what we call skills, which are conversations with the user. So it's simple to create these skills and conversations and, you know, build them in a matter of minutes, and you can, you know, test it inside the product, or, you know, connect it to Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever channel you're using there. And we also have a dashboard that allows you to, you know, really track success and measure, and also improve the conversations or skills that you have. So we have these areas of the dashboard here: training opportunities, the health, where you can say, hey, there's a couple users yesterday that ran into errors. Well, let's look at those skills and see what happened. Was it just a glitch in the network and we lost web services access, or was it something wrong with the skill that we need to redesign, or how are people asking for this skill? And let's work on improving that so we make it easier to find this and ask for it in a way that our end users are asking for it, not IT people are asking for it. Okay. Dale, I think I will hand it back over to you and talk about the specifics of how Luma works with CA Service Management.
Great, thanks, Rich. That was a fantastic overview of capabilities people will typically see with Luma. So when we first started talking about making Luma available for organizations using CA's service management offerings, we focused on a few key aspects of what this integration might look like. And we really wanted to ensure that it had to be easy to set up, had to require that no changes to your existing service management implementation were going to be necessary, because we know that that's something that can create a little bit of a challenge for getting people started on stuff. And it had to be able to leverage your existing definitions, and it had to simplify using skills from the library of existing skills that Serviceaide's already created. So we really wanted to pull this together and make this as simple and straightforward as we possibly could. So how do we manage all of that? Well, first off, we use SOAP and RESTful Web Service APIs in the IT service management system. So that interacts without the need to load any new software onto your local infrastructure. Now, most implementations are going to require the creation of a single contact record within your system that we can then associate with a web services access policy. And then this is going to be used to establish secure communication between Luma and your ITSM system. Since the incident and request area definitions within SDM establish the types of items your system's already set to handle, we can extract those definitions for the creation of new skills, and then we can also import definitions to match the skills that are part of the skills library that's already been created. So these things could be handled as simply as a PDM load or a PDM extract. So it makes things go pretty straightforward. Now, there are only a few simple steps that are needed to get the integration set up. And in almost all cases, your ITSM system is probably already set up for your web services access, which means that you're only going to need to establish the contact and the access policy to get the communication side of things running. And as I mentioned previously, we've created a PDM extract and PDM load scripts to simplify aligning the skills to your specific ticket areas. Now, that's not absolutely necessary, but it can be very helpful on making you get, helping you to get value out of this very quickly. So really, this leaves us with only 6 pieces of information that are needed to connect your Luma system to your CA service management. That's the URL that points to your system, the URL that points to the REST API endpoints, the URL for the SOAP API endpoint, the name of the web service policy that we've set up for it, and then we copy that certificate information of the policy content to be provided over, and then the policy owner's name. So those are the only elements that are necessary to get all these capabilities set up for you. So really that covers the basics for Luma and CA service, IT service management products. And I've just got a couple of items I'd sort of like to recap for a couple of quick takeaways. And first and foremost is the demand for improved self-service capabilities is not new news today. And it also wasn't new news when I discussed it during the opening ITSM session back at CA World 2015. What is new is that the technology to actually provide service without compromising on how people want to be supported is emerging at this point. And for the first time, access to this kind of an approach is easy and inexpensive, making it a possibility for actual ITSM practitioners. So we know that the mechanisms that we currently have in place for self-service have their drawbacks. And within each of your organizations, I think that this would be pretty easy to validate just by looking at some of the metrics that are around reassignments and the number of back and forth follow-up calls and activities that you've got. So if you just browse through your activity log and see how many entries you have for calls and left voicemail, that's a pretty fair indication. And you could also ask your end users if they put off contacting the support desk and why. You think you're going to find that it's usually surrounding areas of how those interactions take place. So if you'd like to see how you could add those capabilities to help support your users in a conversational manner that they would typically prefer and use the channels that they're using the most, we can start a conversation about what kind of value Luma can add to your operation. Rich, do you have anything additional that you'd like to pass along?
I'm furiously answering questions here. Lots of good questions have been asked. But I think a couple things I'll just mention in closing. And the first bullet on conversations are the way we communicate. I mean, I would really stress this over and over again, that, the world we live in today is highly dominated by SMS text messages as well as WhatsApp and WeChat and Facebook Messenger. I have a slide on the number of messages sent on those sort of social messaging platforms are more than the number of active users, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn combined. It's just unbelievable, the growth in messaging, and I think it's really important to realize your customers, maybe they're not telling you this, but they really expect this type of support. And I think the way you scale to meet those needs is through a virtual agent. So I would say this is a train that's coming. that you need to be prepared for. Whether you act on that now or later is certainly, a business decision on your side. But be aware that this is really the way that people expect support in 2018 and beyond.
Okay, with that, we can shift over to a couple of questions. And go ahead, Rich. I'll have you moderate on that.
Oh, sure. So the first thing I'll mention, there's a couple questions related to, is Luma SaaS or on-premise, and just asking some basics about that. So Luma is a SaaS cloud-based solution. We have one data center in the U.S. at this point and one data center in Europe and in Germany to meet different, data center requirements, GDPR and all that stuff. So depending on where you're located, we obviously can associate it with the right data center that you're interested in. So we are a SaaS solution, just to make sure. We don't require any installation on your side, on the on-premise side. Down the road, we have some automation solutions, but there's a small, installer that just allows communication. But that's certainly not required. So we are a SaaS-only solution. And if you have other questions about security and data access and those things, we certainly can have those conversations if you're interested. I did my best to answer them in a sentence or two. But we follow SOC audits and all the best practices around security and data access. And our team certainly does not have access to the conversations that people communicate unless there's certainly DBA issues, and then we ask for your permission before we do those types of things. So we can talk at length more about that, but we're really no different than any other SaaS provider at the enterprise side.
Okay. I also see that we've got a question about what languages Luma supports.
Yes. So on the language side, today we support English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese. So what that means is that, based on your configuration, if you're, a company that operates in, say, Colombia, Spanish is the language of your Luma instance. So Luma can respond in Spanish, understand natural language in Spanish, certainly the interface is in Spanish, and then the same would go for Portuguese and Chinese and, of course, English. It's not hard for us to add additional languages, so if you're interested in, say, I don't know, Italian or French, we certainly can do those things as well.
Okay, and I also understand that even though Luma, the connector for CA service management, is a very recent release, that we also have some rather significant activities, especially down there in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another question that I'm seeing is what kind of chat tools can Luma tie in with?
Yeah, good question. So I should have the list in front of me here, but we do support really I would say the typical chat tools that most organizations use for internal chat. So that is Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Hangouts. We also support Skype and Facebook Messenger, which are less used, but sometimes for managed service providers. We are working on WeChat and WhatsApp at this point, and we've had some requests for Cisco's Jabber replacement. I don't remember the name of that one, but we've had some requests there, so we'll get to that later down the road. But the next big ones coming later this calendar year are WhatsApp and WeChat, because those are really important, I think, in different geographies.
Okay.
So there's one question here I just see. What are metrics to show the zero-touch resolutions compared to the status quo? Are there predefined reports that will allow management to show progress? Great question. We have some of this data in Luma today. There's no single graph to show you this today, and it's something we certainly will plan on building. But we have we have the interactions, the number of interactions that users have had, how many messages have been passed back and forth, how many skills have been triggered, and then how many basically automated workflows are triggered under the covers. So you can get at that information. It's not where we want it to be just yet, but these things aren't hard to build. We have all the data. We just need to build a report on top of it. So that'll be coming in the near future, probably the next month or two. We do about a release every month to 6 weeks, so you'll see that soon. But great question, yeah, because certainly that's the value of showing how many things are automated or resolved at level 0 versus sort of the before and after metric. So that's a good question.
Okay. I understand, obviously this session is focused on the CA service management arena, but I did see a question come by that does Luma connect to other service management solutions other than CA?
Yes. So we certainly connect to our own service management solution, and we also are looking at connecting to others. And there's a few reasons for that. Certainly, there's a reason we want to be able to sell those users, but also e-bonding is really important. So right now, under the covers, you could start a Luma conversation, create a ticket, and CA service management, and then also do some e-bonding integration with ServiceNow. So there's absolutely integrations with other systems that are needed for a variety of reasons, and we know there's managed service providers that for lots of good reasons have multiple service desks. So we'll be able to connect to more and more, and there's a laundry list of ones that we're sort of working through integrating with. But right now, the two that are available and that we're focused on right now are CA service management and certainly our own. So there's a couple of questions. There's a lot of questions here. So one, I'll say a lot of questions related to sort of the on-premise versus SaaS. So is there a roadmap to have it on-premise? There's a few specific geographies that have asked for it on-premise based on China. We have big opportunities and a big team in China. So that is absolutely an on-premise market. So later down the road, we will absolutely have an on-premise version. But right now we're focused on SaaS, and it's something that we'll be building towards, but it's more of a next year proposition on that. Another one here is there a connector to existing knowledge base articles? So with the CA service management integration, you can search your knowledge base that you've already built. You can use those knowledge articles to what I like to call nudge and prompt the user with saying, hey, we know you're asking about configuring email on your mobile device. Well, here's a knowledge article on how to use it. If that doesn't help, and this is all through the chat conversation, if it doesn't help, then let's go through the normal triage process. So you absolutely can use your existing CA service management knowledge base. And then one of the big items coming on our roadmap is being able to leverage knowledge from multiple sources, including things like SharePoint, or even being able to, the terminology we use is like ingest an FAQ. You give us an FAQ, and we'll create the questions and we'll create the answers from that FAQ. And so that's one of the things we're working on right now on that. A couple of very specific questions around Xflow. So yes, it works with Xflow because we're using the APIs under the covers. So I think we really have to dig into that question about all the exact details of where you're thinking of using this. But an end user comes in and talks to Luma through a chat tool of your choice, essentially what platforms you support inside your organization. We open up a ticket through the APIs of CA Service Management, and agents, of course, are going to see those in Xflow or the not Xflow interface. So I think the simple answer to that is yes. If you want to dig into more of the details, we can certainly do that. And there are some very CA-specific questions. I certainly don't have the knowledge to answer those, so I will have to wait for a CA person. I certainly don't want to comment on CA's roadmap, and or do I have knowledge of that either. So I'll let the CA team, if they want to jump in and answer that, or can respond to you offline on a couple of CA-specific questions. And we have a couple more minutes. One other question. How does Luma overlay with SPM heat weather engines in the CA BI Insights Data Mart? So specific on heat and weather, Xflow, again, these are all data points and inputs that would go into that. So heat and weather would work just the way it is. It's just Luma's now a new channel to send tickets through, just like email or a portal or anything else. So that doesn't change anything. On the CABI Insights Data Mart, so on that side, right now that our data is separate from CA's, so we could look into building that integration. I don't think that's a big deal. Our data is stored in a format that can easily be connected to other sources. Okay. Dale, anything else on your side?
I don't believe so. I think the only other item that I don't have access to the questions list on my UI. So, you know, in the past, I have had people ask about pricing and licensing.
Yes, great question. So the way Luma is licensed is based on, you know, the simple answer is based on transaction. So of course, what is a transaction? So a transaction is a fulfilled skill. And when I say a fulfilled skill, we built a licensing model based on value. If a customer asks Luma a question, Luma can't answer that, we're certainly not going to charge you for that. If a customer asks a question, you know, maybe they ask for, I don't know, reset a network password, and we show you the network printer skill, that's not adding value. So if the user says exit or no, this isn't helpful, again, we're not charging for that. So we're really focused on the skill, which is a conversation with the user that has an action or an automation at the end of it. And so that is a chargeable transaction. So if we created a ticket, if we resolve the user's issue through automation, you know, resetting their password, or, you know, triggering a workflow in Salesforce to update the permission, you know, certainly that is a transaction. And it's not expensive. We're focused on really keeping it simple, and we're focused on drastically reducing your costs. If HDI says a normal ticket costs between, you know, $16 and $25, we're under $1. So we can talk more about the pricing and its volume pricing, but it's really simple and priced for more of a mid-market customer rather than an enterprise that is throwing money around at something like this.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, it's important that was also one of the elements that we were looking at as we were trying to pull together this integration, that we wanted to eliminate the risk of trying this out. You know, it's not going to take a whole lot of time and energy to set it up. It's also not going to be a particularly expensive activity as you're determining whether or not this makes good sense for your customer base. Okay, well, I think that's all we've got. We are coming up at the top of the hour as well. I'd like to thank all of our participants today. This has been a great opportunity to sit down and chat about this, and I'd like to thank Rich for coming along and passing this information in. We can be reached by the information that was posted in the presentation for our LinkedIn addresses, or directly through, you know, CA can get you in touch with us as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Well, thank you, Dale. Thank you, Rich, for this great presentation. Thank you, everyone, for participating. The recording will be posted to the site by the end of the week, so by the end of tomorrow. And with that, I wish everybody a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.